and later officially open the Kenya Urban Forum 2023. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Please, let's take our seats. Asanteni sana. Ministers present, Principal Secretaries present, Your Excellencies, Governors, Members of Parliament, Senators, the membership of the County Assembly of Nakuru, distinguished participants and delegates, good afternoon. Last week, at the launch of the second session of the UN Habitat Assembly, and Madam Maimuna has spoken to it, I participated in a forum that reflected at great length on the urgency, challenges, and opportunities in connection with sustainable urbanization. I am encouraged by the number of highly engaged major stakeholders in the area of human settlement and especially urbanization that I have been able to engage with before and even today. Clearly, urbanization is a defining trend of the next phase of socioeconomic development, is a matter that should occupy us immensely because sustainable solutions are urgently needed to enable our countries govern effectively and serve efficiently. Urbanization is a general human trend at all times. However, rural poverty, underemployment is driving increasing numbers of people to urban areas in search of opportunities. In our part of the world, urban centers have historically developed only limited capacity and cannot serve large populations adequately. Even before the current tide of runaway urbanization got underway, our urban authorities were already struggling to provide for comparatively modest populations. At independence, for example, Kenya was a rural nation of 9 million people. Only 8% of this population was urban. Now, Kenya is urbanizing at the annual rate of approximately 5%, one of the highest in the world. 34% of our population today live in urban centers. And by 2050, 50% of all Kenyans will be living in urban settlements. That is phenomenal. It is a challenge, but it is also an opportunity if we work smart with the interventions that we have. Rapid urbanization coupled with low growth of essential housing, water, energy, transport, sanitation, and other infrastructure has intensified demand, leading to such manifestations of unbearable pressure as unplanned and unsafe developments, poor sanitation, and hazardous pollution, crowded and unsanitary housing, and poor access to other goods like education, healthcare, and security have hugely expanded. The unprecedented growth of our urban areas is therefore of unplanned, uncontrolled, and unsustainable type. Over 50% of urban residents inhabit informal settlements. Statistics from the government of Kenya show that we have 1,411 informal settlements, slums in our country, with close to 7 million people living in those informal settlements. We have negative implications on human dignity, security, safety, and health because of these informal settlements. As a result, our commitment to sustainable development goals is undermined, most of all SDG number 11, by what is the trends that we see. It is time to take radical measures to bring our urbanization under control in order to enable urban institutions and authorities to significantly improve livability in these settlements and in our country. Urban areas must be transformed from spaces where it is difficult for authorities to provide services for citizens to obtain them. In other words, we must, with great urgency, steward the transformation of our urban areas into well-planned, adequately managed, well-governed, and sufficiently resourced areas. The future, as has been said by everybody here, is urban. We cannot and must not argue with this inevitability. Our role is concerned with how, rather than whether, future urbanization will unfold. Our primary mandate is to facilitate an expeditious transition to Kenya's desired urban future. As a starting point, the Constitution provides a robust institutional foundation for sustainable urbanization by mandating national legislation to provide for the governance and management of urban areas and cities under Article 184. The legal framework governing urbanization and urban governance is also in place in the form of the Urban Areas and Cities Act, Cap 275, upon which a city like Nakuru was pronounced as a city, and the policy framework set out by Sessional Paper Number 1 of 2016 on national urban development. So we have the constitutional, we have the legal, we have the institutional, we have the policy framework that will assist us manage this necessity and this imperative of urbanization. The primary barrier to the implementation of our urban governance and management framework lies in the need to harmonize it with the County Government Act, as well as the Physical and Land Use Planning Act, together with a review of the urban development policy. All those have to be brought in line and to speak together and to synergize so that national legislation, county legislation, the County Government Act speak to the same thing, because urbanization is with us for the present and for the future. There is no reason for further delay in undertaking this harmonization. And the Minister and the Council of Governors need to interrogate the areas that need to be harmonized so that we can, with a sense of urgency, be able to do what we have to do. The advent of devolution has greatly accelerated urbanization in our country. County governments and the location of the county headquarters are significant catalysts of urbanization. Counties, therefore, have an important role to play in promoting orderly management of urbanization. I listened to Susan, the governor of Nakuru, tell us what she's doing about setting up urban areas in many places, including one in a place called Mwisho wa Lami. I thought, Susan, we already did something about the Mwisho of Lami. There is no more Mwisho ya Lami. I thought we connected the Lami all the way to Nakuru. So I suggest that as you transform that particular township into an urban area, I suggest you give it a different name. In economic development terms, urbanization is a tremendous factor. Towns and cities are important economic nodes, contributing significantly to the national GDP. Nairobi alone, for example, accounts for 21% of Kenya's GDP. On the other hand, towns and cities are major consumers of resources and drivers of environmental degradation, leading to climate change. Demand in towns and cities can distort the supply chains of important goods, affecting prices and dictating the cost of living. Environmental malpractices like the discharge of untreated effluent and poor disposal of solid waste pose serious risks, while toxic pearls of smoke from industries often engulf megacities. We must take all these possibilities into account as we ponder the next course of urbanization during deliberations in this forum. And I encourage you, being representatives from across the divide, from national government, from our counties, to interrogate how we can work together so that we don't end up with a situation like the way we have today. For example, in Nairobi City, we are grappling with what to do with the Nairobi rivers because of the kind of sludge and sewage that has been pumped into those cities. The Kenya Urban Forum assembles stakeholders and strategic partners into a coalition that collaboratively and innovatively tackles the most salient issues and fundamental dimensions of the urbanization phenomenon with a view to generating sustainable mechanisms for transition from hazardous urbanization to livable towns and cities. It is important to appreciate all of them for their goodwill, commitment, and solidarity. Your support inspires us to do even better, and we do not take it for granted. Our urban development agenda has benefited from partnerships and collaborations with the World Bank, French Development Agency, Swedish International Development Agency, and UN Habitat, among many partners who work with us on this very important agenda around our cities and how to improve the availability of services and goods in our towns. The World Bank's support for the Kenya Urban Support Program, now coming to an end, has contributed significantly to the development of urban institutions. Consequently, 70 municipalities have been established, while more are being set up by county governments. We look forward to further engagement with our partners with a view to extending the partnership to enable Kenya establish functional, efficient, and sustainable urban institutions. Although much commendable progress has been accomplished in promoting sustainable urban development in the country, much more remains to be done to maximize urban livability. I am persuaded that a dedicated urban development fund is a vital vehicle to navigate Kenya's transition to a desirable urban future. I know Governor Orengo, reading the statement of the Council of Governors, spoke to this issue. It is time to bring the National Urban Development Policy 2016 into operation to facilitate the creation of this fund. And I undertake that the government of Kenya is going to do it and ensure that we create the necessary partnership with the counties so that we can, in a collaborative manner, be able to deliver on this fund. And similarly, I urge county governments to do their part by devising innovative approaches for generating revenues to finance urban development. And we are ready to assist county governments in doing this. We have integrated affordable housing as a critical pillar of our national bottom-up economic transformation agenda, not only to deal with affordable housing supply gaps, but also as a means of creating employment for millions of our citizens. For the sustainable urbanization imperative to materialize, it must translate into an affordable housing program at its core. And I think I have spoken to this issue severally, and I want to repeat that as we work on the housing program, we've committed ourselves that we are going to roll out the construction of 250,000 houses every year. It is not just about houses. Yes, the houses are important because 7 million of our citizens today live in slums. We owe it to them, to their dignity, and to the well-being of our citizenry, and to the future generations. All our children will be in cities. I hear some people say, how is building a house in the city going to help me? I am living in some rural place. They forget that the people who will be living in those cities will either be their children or their grandchildren, and they have a choice whether these children will be going to live in slums or they will be living in some decent housing units. And apart from sorting out the housing question, it is the whole exercise of creating jobs. How do we increase manufacturing as a percentage of our GDP? How do we make our cement factories to work? How do we make our steel factories to work? How do we engage in ensuring that all our construction products factories are working? How do we ensure that our engineers, our quantity surveyors, our electricians, our masons, our carpenters, our electricians, how do we get this huge body of human capital working? We are generating close to 500,000 people every year from our TVETs. We are generating close to 800,000 young people into the labor market every year. It should concern us as citizens. How are these people going to be meaningfully engaged? We are spending, as I said earlier, we are spending $5 billion, 650 billion Kenya shillings every year in the education of our citizens, from primary school to university. What is our plan to ensure that the output of this great investment contributes to the development of our country? How do we ensure that the women and men who get out of this channel of education, training, and acquisition of knowledge are meaningfully engaged? We have to responsibly think about it. You have convened for the purpose of rigorously engaging views in order to form a fuller appreciation of the state of our urban affairs and then develop strategic pathways towards inclusive and sustainable urbanization. I urge you to use this important opportunity to develop a robust roadmap that will guide our overdue transition to sustainable urban futures. I wish all delegates fruitful deliberations and convey the government's commitment to our shared agenda. I want to thank all our partners for working with us in this very important space, and I look forward with great anticipation to receiving a report of your proceedings on how we are going to manage urbanization into the future. The Kenya Urban Forum, the first in the Republic of Kenya, is now officially open. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. One more round of applause for His Excellency. We just have one more item we'd like to do before we have our one-on-one with you, Your Excellency, with your permission, and that is the signing of an MOU, which is the HCPD 2023-2027, which, with your kind request, we'll ask you to witness, and also the launch of the Nakuru County Spatial Plan. That's the Nakuru County Spatial Plan and the signing of an MOU, HCPD 2023-2027. I'll request we also have the two seats on the podium, kindly, so that we'll then invite the next part of this session, which is going to be a brief session where we'll have a one-on-one with His Excellency, together with the editorial director, RMS, that is Linus Kaikai, who will come on stage. So kindly, those who are helping us with the seats to get on stage, to kindly do that now. We may now take our seats. Kindly, we can sit down. Linus, if I can kindly request that you come on stage, because the next session you're going to be moderating. And for the benefit of introduction, Linus Kaikai is the editorial director, Royal Media Services. He's going to be moderating this session with His Excellency immediately after the signing of the MOU and also the launch of the Nakuru County Spatial Plan. Thank you, Excellency. A kind request that His Excellency will then join Linus Kaikai on stage to have a brief conversation. Linus, over to you.
Thank you very much. And Your Excellency President William Ruto, our conversation will come quite broadly from the remarks you have made. And I've picked something that you've said about your mandate to transition the country to a desired urban future. And there's something you've pointed out there as a standing problem. And that is the problem of existing planning gaps. And you said, I can quote you, Mr. President, that yours is to convert the urban areas to be spaces where authorities can provide services and the residents of those areas can receive those services. I think, Mr. President, you are talking to a very serious problem. If you look at, for example, the city of Nairobi, whose last planning is said broadly to be dependent on what the colonial authorities left. On the planning element, Mr. President, what are your immediate interventions?
First, let me contextualize this. As I said in my statement, Kenya is urbanizing at the rate of between 4.4 and 5%, the highest, one of the highest globally. The future is urban. 68% overpopulation by the year 2050 will be living in urban settlements. So this is not a problem that is going away. This is a challenge that is growing. That's number one. That's the context. Let me contextualize even further. We have, as I said, 1,411 slum dwellings in Kenya, the largest being in the city of Nairobi and in many of our cities. So when we talk about slums, many people cannot figure it. They think we are talking about Nairobi or some other obscure place. We have slum dwellings, including in Naivasha, right here. We have it in many towns. So the challenge of urbanization is with us. The challenge of informal settlements is with us. Appreciating that problem is actually big steps in sorting it out. It is part of the reason that we thought through this problem, and that is why housing is one of the programs that informs my administration's agenda. And it is because it starts with what you have said. We have not appreciated the planning aspects. And because we have not appreciated the planning aspects, that is why we are unable to plan for goods, for services in our urban centers. And what is going on is that because it's unplanned, because there's no program, you end up with informal settlements. So the moment you address yourself to this challenge, the moment you start to plan how you're going to build your cities, how you're going to provide for housing, then it informs where the markets are, where the schools will be, how mobility will be planned, where what kind of categories will be built where. So the planning element rolls in, because you cannot run the housing plan without first having a proper plan. So PS Hinga and CS Njeru will tell you that is what we are grappling with. And it starts with digitizing land records, which is an exercise that is going on in earnest. We have committed a lot of resources in that direction, ensuring that we understand what parcels are where, who owns them, so that we can plan for it efficiently. And with the whole subject of housing, it is not, as I said, it's not just about housing, because many people, when they think about it, many people are asking me, Mr. President, who told you we need houses? You know, this is the question that people keep asking me. But you know, the same people are asking.
There's actually one that asked, Nani hana kwao?
So, you know, so many people hana kwao. In fact, you know, the people living in slums, they have nowhere. It is not their choice to live in a place where there is no toilet, where there is no water, where there is no access to electricity, there is no access to nothing. It is not a choice for somebody to live in that kind of settlement. 7 million people don't have kwao, so to speak, if we were strictly to say. And as a result of this, many people at the same time, while they tell me, who told you we will need houses, they tell me our kids don't have jobs. And many people cannot connect the dot between housing and jobs. Housing and the housing products that create jobs. They do not get a relationship, they cannot connect the dot between housing and electricians and masons and carpenters and engineers and quantity surveyors and architects and all that. So it is our responsibility as government to assist fellow citizens to connect the dots and to understand that housing delivers dignity to the people living in informal settlements, creates jobs for our young people, creates jobs in our industries, gives opportunity for all of us to live in an organized society, and most importantly, many of our counties today, including Siaya, where Orengo comes from, a lot of agricultural land is being subdivided for settlement, when in the flip side, we should be using those agricultural lands for food production. And what happens is that we end up with a competition between food and settlement. And the reason why we have a big debate today in Kenya about the cost of living, because only 14% of Kenya is arable, has opportunity for us to grow our food. That's why we are imagining Galana. That's why we are imagining other areas, because we have limited land for agricultural production. So this whole exercise about housing speaks to more things than a mere 4 walls that makes a house.
Your Excellency, I just want to follow up on what you've said about agricultural land, which is being lost to settlements. And I would like to hear your thoughts on how you intend to fix that, because you've expressed your concern a couple of times. At one time, you spoke about the 50 by 100s that are basically reducing land to unproductive standards. How do you intend to fix that in this urban strategy?
You know, the reason why you find people in Mlolongo, now they have gone beyond Mlolongo, they have gone beyond Gitengela. Now they are approaching Isinya. Lengu keeps telling me, you know, what is going on, Mr. President? You know, we are losing, we have nowhere to graze our cows. It is because people don't have opportunity. People cannot have no access. The land in Nairobi, you cannot afford. You know, every house is. I think we did an analysis. I think Hinga can tell you. We did an analysis. On average, the cheapest house in Nairobi was about 11 million. Now, because of affordable housing, we are bringing it from 11 million to between 600,000 and 1 million. That means the fellow going to Isinya has no reason to go to Isinya anymore. Whatever he's looking for in Isinya, he can find it in the middle of Nairobi. That's what affordable housing does. So once we have created an incentive for somebody not to go and look for 50 by 100, because the reason why they are going to look for 50 by 100 is because they cannot find a house that they can afford. And that is why we are talking about affordable housing. so that instead of subdividing agricultural land, we create incentives for people to buy affordable houses, which sorts out the problem they are trying to sort out by going to subdivide agricultural land. So we are flipping it, you know. Don't blame the people who are going to support, to subdivide agricultural land. It is because there is opportunity. But we want to decimate that opportunity by making sure that there is a house that is affordable. You don't have to subdivide agricultural land. Take, for example, where you come from. That's beautiful agricultural land. But with time, you will see subdivision. Many of the ranches are now being subdivided to be owned by individuals. I had Governor Lenku, I had Governor of Narok. They were saying, we must be careful because this subdivision of ranches into individual titles is eventually going to subdivide this land and make it unusable for agricultural or even pastoral activity. So we need to deal with that challenge, and to answer directly your question, we are providing alternative so that it is no longer tenable, it is no longer attractive to go to Kitengela because you can find the same thing in the city where it is easier to get to your work, where there are other settlements, where you have access to water, you have access to transport, you have access to a market, you have access to school, you have access to a hospital, and even for government, it is a lot easier to deliver government service in a place where it is planned and we can keep all settlements in one place. It is easier to deliver water, it is easier to deliver transport, it is easier to deliver all services rather than stretching every service to people living in different parts of our country.
Thanks, Your Excellency. You speak of incentives, and I would like to hear, at a policy front, where is the interface with the counties? Because you mentioned land that is being lost that used to be agricultural going to settlements. And I have in mind Kiambu County, which once used to be the bastion of coffee farming, and now it is a game park of flats. What are those incentives? And at the policy front, what is the conversation going to be like between your government, the national government, and those in the counties?
By the way, if there is one place the counties and the national government have a convergence of action and ideas and a concurrence of agreement, it is on housing. Every county that I can remember, every county have actually identified a place for us to do affordable housing because they see the opportunity to provide for housing for their citizens, to create jobs for their counties, to create industry for their counties. Kiambu, you have mentioned, Governor Wamatangi is here. We've had many conversations with Governor Wamatangi. In fact, Governor Wamatangi is among the counties that have given us the most number of plots for us to do affordable housing because they see the opportunity. And they also see the danger of land fragmentation and the subdivision of agricultural land for settlement. They appreciate, they see it, and that is why they are working with us on affordable housing. So on this particular subject, I think the national government and the counties are aligned.
And where there'll be shortfalls, if, for example, county government doesn't have land to give, will there be the option of acquiring that land? And how do you intend to address the concerns that compensation for land, especially on huge government projects, giving the SGR as an example, is sometimes too costly? If the SGR alone could do the upwards of 30 billion just in compensation of land, you can imagine how much affordable housing may cost before the project even takes off.
The good news, however, Linus, the good news here is that either by default or by design, we have a lot of national government or county land that is available. That's the good news. And secondly, we have worked with the counties, and many of the counties are willing to engage with people who own land in their counties so that that land can be made available. And for your information, in some of the instances, we do not even have to buy the land, even if we don't have it. What we do is we enter into a partnership with owners of land so that we develop the locals' housing, and it is shared between the owners of the land and us as government who are developing. So we create a win-win where government comes up with the plans, we put in the infrastructure, we put in the sewer system, the roads, the electricity, the water into a private person's land, and we share the outcome of the development. So since it's a win-win engagement, we do not necessarily run into the challenge you have mentioned. But speaking to the subject of land compensation, I have taken the position that we spend a colossal amount of money. Today, we have a pending bill of 50 billion Kenya shillings on land compensation, which to me is unjustified. And unfortunately, many of these values were arrived at through means that are not correct. There is an incestuous, forgive the word, relationship between those who value the land, those who award the grants, and finally the people who pay. You know, and that is why I have said that we are going to change the law so that National Land Commission will do the compensation, they will identify the land, but it will be valued by the Ministry of Lands. And we want to account, we want to hold everybody to account. I know the National Land Commission is uncomfortable. I think they have said they will go to court, which is okay. But I will not allow the National Land Commission to continue on this spending spree. I know, for example, that there are people who have stepped forward to say, even for land that was worth 1 million shillings, characters went and told them, why don't we make it 2 million shillings so that we can share the money? You see, how can I preside over that kind of nonsense? I will not. I will not allow that to go on. You know, I have a responsibility to the people of Kenya to make sure that their money is spent appropriately and they get value for money.
Thank you, Excellency. And I would like us to keep on the thread of accounting for every penny. And the concerns when it comes to your affordable housing plan has been about the governance of the fund. Because you're dealing with a country and a background that has a scandalous past. People still remember of the NSSF days and how money was lost in housing schemes that never took off. How do you intend, Your Excellency, to make this different, to make every coin that people are going to contribute to the affordable housing scheme to be accounted for?
It is justified that in the past we have not used public resources, and the era of NSSF housing comes to the mind of many Kenyans. It is also true that we have a housing problem. It is also true that we have an employment problem. It is also true that by engaging in housing, we have the possibility of not just sorting out the housing problem, the unemployment problem, and the manufacturing problem. Are we going to walk away from our program in housing, which has the potential to sort out our slum problem, to sort out our manufacturing problem, to sort out our unemployment problem, because we are scared that governance might run into trouble? it is our responsibility to sort out the governance. We must not allow governance to stand in the way of the huge opportunity that we have to transform our country. And it is our responsibility. And I have said that I am willing to look Kenyans in the eye and to say the buck stops with me, and I will answer for it.
Thank you, Excellency. Just two more areas to cover because our time is running out. And one is the trust deficit that emerges in this conversation around the housing strategy. How do you intend to plug that? Just for ordinary people, like the gentleman asking, kila mtu akona kwao. How do you intend to win and to build and win that trust?
I think where this conversation is today, Linus, it is very different from where it started. I hear now many people saying, yes, we need to consider, because they've come to understand the relationship between our housing plan and jobs for their children, and opportunity for them to for manufacturing, the opportunity for us to improve on our slum dwellings and provide dignity for Kenyans who today live in conditions that are subhuman, if I may say that. So many people are beginning to appreciate. Initially, many people were wondering, what are these houses about? But the more Kenyans realize that this is about the employment of our children, and we have 800,000 young people getting out of college, school, university every year, then they begin to appreciate that if this is going to sort out our unemployment challenge, if this is going to bring back our manufacturing as a percentage of GDP, then this is an important program. Let me also tell you, Linus, that even as we do that, there is also a lot of deceit and propaganda, you know, and politics. I must say, sometimes, well, politics, whatever it is, because all of us agree. I have never come across one leader who does not agree that housing will sort out our problem. All our manifestos on both sides of the political formation had housing. Today, one side of the divide have changed their mind about housing. It is not because they have a different conviction, but it's because they want to play politics. I think as a nation, there must be a fine line between what we can play politics with and what we can do together as a country. And finally, the media. Huh?
Tell me, Your Excellency.
The media has spun huge propaganda. Oh, I don't know what. Oh, I don't know what. Sometimes we try to understand that the media supported a different candidate and their candidate lost. But surely they should move on. I mean, the election is over. And you know, we are a democracy. Nobody is going to be held. I mean, it would be foolhardy for anybody to think that everybody is going to support you. It's not possible. And you know, in a democracy, people make choices. But you can't penalize them because they made a different choice. You know, we are a democracy. If everybody should support the candidate of their choice. But once the election is over, surely, we should be gentlemen. We should be democratic to say, okay, I supported a different candidate, but since this character won, I don't like him very much. But because it is democracy, let us support what is positive, what is good for the country, and of course, when it is necessary, I have no issue.
I'm not sure, Your Excellency, whether questions about affordable housing have taken political party lines. We've seen questions from People come from all regions, including regions that voted for you, Your Excellency. And just in the accountability question where the media normally comes in, and we've seen articles in papers and commentaries in television and all that, all pointing at how that money will be accounted for. Mr. President, the country is scarred by NSSF. And the question that is being asked is, how do you ensure your affordable housing program does not create new billionaires that NSSF created in yesteryears?
I have told you with clarity that Parliament is going to discuss the housing levy fund. And how it's going to be managed. The board, the oversight board, will be representative of both government and the private sector. We're going to ensure that there is a proper, accountable mechanism. I know very well, as a politician, that if something goes wrong, I will be held to account politically, right? So I must make sure that nothing goes wrong. And I am decisive. I am intentional about making sure that we hold the trust of the people of Kenya by making sure that they get value for all their resources. So the same way we are being held to account, the same way we have oversight bodies making sure that we spend public resources appropriately, we are going to make sure that this fund, like all other funds, are held in a manner that is accountable to the people of Kenya, by making sure that we have an oversight board, by making sure that it is run professionally. In the board, for example, we are going to make sure that we have pension funds on board. We have Federation of Kenya Employers on board. We have representatives of public servants on board. We have representatives of trade unions on board. We have government in its broader sense involved. We have counties also involved in the board to make sure that this fund is accountable. And I like the discourse we are having, because the discourse we are having is telling us what the people of Kenya expect. And it is not wrong for the people of Kenya to expect us to be held to the highest account that is possible. That is possible. That is the right thing to do. That is legitimate, and we must do it.
Mr. President, if you could quickly just clarify the space of the affordable housing program by your government, and also other schemes that existed before your program came into space. And on the 29th of June last year, when you launched your manifesto ahead of the election, you spoke of pushing mortgages from 10,000 to about 1 million through existing banks and other schemes. Do you still have your eyes on that, or everything is now going to affordable housing in the government? Yeah.
We are firmly on it. In fact, I think you maybe you didn't get our program right. Our intention, which still stands, was we have close to 30,000 mortgages, not 10,000, about 30,000 mortgages. It is our intention to move mortgages to between $1 million and $2 million under our program. It is the same program. It was not about existing programs, because in any case, existing programs then only generated 1% of affordable housing. All the other 90-something percent were houses that could not be, many Kenyans could not afford. That's why they were getting out of town. The affordable housing is going to be the avenue for us to increase our mortgages from 30,000 to 1 million, by God's grace, to 2 million.
Thank you, President. Our last question, so that we allow you to move to your next engagement. I would like to finish up on the Kenya forum, the first one, this being the first one. And in your speech, you spoke about harmonization of laws and the various policies that are governing the urban space. And P.S. Hinga did mention about kicking the can down the road.